If you're one of the thousands of people who take an Uber or Lyft when they go to the airport, your ride to Logan might be getting a little more complicated and more expensive. But if you drive in yourself, get a ride from family or friends, or take the Logan Express, your commute could become a bit less chaotic. At least that is the idea behind the new rules Massport is proposing for rideshare companies like Uber and Lyft. If the proposal does go into effect, rideshare drivers would be banned from dropping passengers off at their terminals and picking them up in adjacent parking lots like they do now. Instead, riders would be picked up and dropped off at the airport's central parking garage, which would mean less traffic at the terminals, but a much longer walk for travelers carrying their luggage. Taxis and limos would still be allowed at the terminals. Massport is also proposing hikes in fees for all rideshare trips, up from $3.25 to $5, which would apply to both riders and drivers, though for carpoolers that fee would be cut in half, down to $2.50. Officials say they're working with rideshare companies before they submit the rules for final approval, but as written, it's hard to see Uber and Lyft getting on board. So are these new rules the best way to cut down on congestion? And is the T ready to pick up the slack? Joining me now are Shirley Leung, a WGBH contributor and interim editorial page editor at the Boston Globe, and former Secretary of Transportation Jim Aloisi, now a contributor to Commonwealth Magazine, a founding partner of Pemberton Square Group, and a member of the board for the nonprofit Transit Matters. Thank you both for being here. So, let me start with the column that you guys ran, or the editorial that you guys ran. I wanted to read the first paragraph in which you set the stage to express your concern about how this might play out. Someone or some group of people wrote, "Imagine you're a family heading to Disney World with 2 young children and a flight to catch. You take an Uber to Logan Airport, but instead of the usual curbside drop-off, you're deposited at the central garage. Dragging kids and luggage, you must make your way from there to your departure terminal." Is it really that dire a picture to paint? I mean, I've gone to Logan and had to carry, car seats or whatever, and it can be a pain, but you got one of those little carts, and you tough it out and you make it there. Is it really that awful a thing to contemplate?
It is. I mean, think about going to the airport is stressful, right? You have to make a plane, and if you have family in tow, it's a pain. And now, under the proposal, everyone will be coming under central parking. And we wrote this editorial, which, by the way, was the most popular editorial last week. I mean, this is how people were up in arms, clicking on this and reading this, saying that this is unfair, not only to Uber and Lyft, because the taxis get to stay curbside, right, but it's also unfriendly to consumers. And so basically our point is that Massport can do better. Yes, there's congestion, but there are better ways to solve that. We had a torrent of letters to the editors, even providing solutions on this. Okay,
so you guys suggested some alternate approaches in the editorial, and you say you got readers suggesting too. What are a couple?
One of them is brilliantly, sounds like some guy from Cambridge wrote in and said, some scientist, he's like talking about coordinating algorithms, and basically he said, if one of the problems that the Uber and Lyft have to circle, right? They drop off someone, they circle, and it causes traffic. What if they dropped off and picked up in one place? Maybe arrivals or departures, and so you wouldn't have the constant circling, because that's the problem. So that's number one. I know Jim wants to jump in.
Yeah,
here.
Well, let's since I gave a somewhat dramatic reading of the Globe editorial, I got to do my dramatic reading of your tweets, because you pushed back at this vigorously. You were not a fan of the argument that the Globe page was making. So the first tweet of yours I want to read, responding to the Globe editorial. "The idea that primarily price-sensitive people take the T to Logan is a false trope, an inaccurate preconceived idea that ignores changing mobility preferences and the desire of a broad spectrum of travelers to reach destinations sustainably." And you followed that up with, I think, my personal favorite. "I've read this Globe opinion editorial 3 times, and it gets more infuriating each time. Its sole focus is on curbside convenience. Its primary takeaway, convenience for suburban leisure travelers, trumps quality of life for urban residents or other travelers. Truly wrong-headed." So let's unpack that.
I don't know if I made myself clear. No, look, there's a big problem at Logan Airport. Anyone who uses Logan Airport knows it. If you're traveling and you're on a shuttle bus getting to a terminal, or you're driving to a terminal, at peak, you're stuck in some of the worst traffic congestion around in that constrained roadway environment. Yeah. Massport is trying to deal with several problems here. They're trying to deal with that roadway congestion problem, which is also a curbside congestion issue. They're trying to deal with the reality that 2 years after they allowed Uber and Lyft to come in, it's 30% of the total vehicles going into Logan, and it's 12 million vehicles with almost half that are deadheaded.
But isn't that a sign?
By the way, we should say deadheaded is this is a car that comes
empty.
in without carrying anyone and leaves without picking anyone up, right? And I think it's 5 million in 2018 of those.
And Uber and Lyft, I think, understand that problem, and I think they can fix it. You know, again, using algorithms. I mean, using technology, they probably can fix this. But this says something. Why is Uber and Lyft so popular? Because it's so hard to get to the airport by public transit, by the Silver Line or the Blue Line. So that's why the market is filled up. That's why everyone's taking Uber and Lyft. It's the best way to get there.
Before we get to consensus, because I want to sow discord before you guys get all make nice. Shirley, Jim mentioned 12 million trips every year. 5 million of them, kind of a breathtaking number, without bringing someone or picking someone up. My assumption would be, yeah, the people running Uber and Lyft are smart, but if they had algorithms that could figure that out, they would have done it already. That is a big problem, right? Especially if those cars are then going and driving around East Boston.
By the way, the Massport plan solves that, right? Because it requires them to pick someone up.
Okay, noted. I was going to ask if you don't.
But
so what's another way of? I mean,
I guess can you do that with like last time I was at an airport, I think in D.C. It's not rocket science here. I was picked up by an Uber that just did a drop-off, and all done on curbside.
And you mentioned certain locations at the airport.
Right, and other airports are grappling with this. One, they charge a higher fee if you do for curbside, so that will decrease the number of people who do curbside, and perhaps decrease some of the congestion curbside. Maybe designate some other airports say during the peak hours when we know there's lots of cars, we'll put them maybe at the center, put them in a location that's a little further away and make things move a little bit better.
Let's get back to the T for a second, because one question I have, Jim, and I think you've chronicled this on Twitter, your own experiences with it, but we just had another week where it seemed like the T was melting down in slow motion, where everything imaginable was going wrong and messing up people's commutes. I think we've got some pictures here. You're a red line rider, right?
It's probably in that photo.
Okay,
I'm a red line rider too.
You guys must have had a great time. So how do you make the argument to people who take Uber and Lyft because they find the T currently deeply unreliable? They'd like to take it, but it doesn't work for them.
Right.
Isn't it a tough sell to them to say, okay, we're going to make it harder for you to get to the airport via this mode of transit, and we're going to push you to this mode of transit, which should be working a lot better than it is?
It is a hard sell. And one of the things I say consistently, and I've written about, is that Massport can't do this alone. They shouldn't do this alone. The MBTA needs to step up. For example, it needs to connect the red line to the blue line. It needs to put money in the CIP, the construction, construction investment plan this year to start that project, right? Because if I'm in Kendall Square and I work in tech and I want to get on a flight to Dubai tonight, I probably would take the red line, connect to blue, and I'm there. Today I take Uber because the lines don't connect. So the T needs to step up on red to blue. The T needs also to really take a hard look at the Silver Line and improve it in ways. Now, there are things they can do, including let the bus take the ramp down to Ted Williams Tunnel.
Right.
Obviously, with foresight, if we were redoing the Big Dig, what we should have done, and what I think will happen, it may not be in our lifetime, but will eventually happen, is there'll be a dedicated tunnel for HOV and bus crossing the harbor. The other thing I want to point out, so Massport cannot do this alone, but Massport has to do something. The current conditions are intolerable. There are two issues going on here. One is cost, one is convenience. I don't think anyone's complaining necessarily about Massport saying it's going to cost, we're going to impose a higher fee on Uber and Lyft. What they're complaining about is convenience, and I think I would ask everyone to take a deep breath and say, look, if I park at central parking, if I park at leisure parking, I have to take a shuttle. I have to do something. If I take transit, I have to take a shuttle to get to the terminal. Uber and Lyft riders shouldn't be treated better than anyone else. And I agree. Taxis should be treated the same way. I agree with that. The only exemptions I would make would be what we would call kiss and drop off, right? Because I think in those circumstances, it's sort of hard to say no to those people.
Yeah.
But you can deal with that other.
I think you get the last word here.
Well, I think some people.
And by the way, we were saying, how are we going to fill 9 minutes talking about Uber and Lyft? It looks like we
Well, I was going to say, like, one of the concerns, I hope that Massport, it seems like the Massport, some of the board members are raising concerns about the convenience issue. And so I hope they actually take a second look. Is there an alternative? Maybe pilot them before they implement. I mean, we have letters from business travelers from complaining that this is terrible for them. They, again, going to the airport, you need to hit that mark. You need to get on that plane. It's not like you're just, if you miss a meeting, it's okay. But you got to get on that plane.
We got to leave it there. Thank you both for coming in to talk about this, and good luck to both of you on the red line.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll need it.